On his birthday, Aaron Hayes waited all night, but Jason Miller never came. The city outside his apartment kept moving, lights flickering on, cars passing, people laughing somewhere far below, but inside, everything felt paused, like time had decided not to move with him. The cake in the fridge stayed untouched. The candle was still unlit. At 9:12 p.m., he called Jason for the first time. It rang until silence. At 10:03, he called again, straight to voicemail. By 11:47, Aaron stopped checking the time. He already knew the answer. His phone lit up once, not with Jason's name, but with a notification he had been avoiding for weeks. Final notice: Omega registration deadline approaching. Please submit your pairing choice. Aaron stared at it, thumb hovering, then locked the screen again. Not yet, because some part of him still believed Jason would walk through that door and make everything simple. Jason Miller wasn't cruel. That was what made it so hard to leave. If he had been cold, dismissive, or openly unfaithful, Aaron could have walked away months ago. But Jason was careful. Careful with his words, careful with how much he gave, careful never to promise anything he didn't want to keep. He knew exactly how to give just enough to keep someone from leaving, without ever giving enough to be held accountable. 3 years ago, Jason had chosen Aaron, or at least, that was what it felt like. A glance that lingered too long at a quiet event. A conversation that stretched past midnight. Then dinners, weekends, and eventually a key that was never officially offered but never taken back. It had never been defined, never labeled, but it had been consistent. And for Aaron, that consistency slowly became something dangerously close to trust. Jason liked that Aaron was easy, that he didn't argue, didn't push, didn't demand answers Jason didn't want to give. Aaron still remembered the first time Jason had said it, almost like a compliment. "You're simple to be with." Back then, Aaron had smiled. He hadn't understood what it really meant. Over time, the distance didn't appear, it grew. Quietly, gradually. Jason stayed out later. Messages came less often. Conversations ended before they began. And every time Aaron felt that shift, every time he almost found the courage to ask what was happening, Jason would pull him back just enough. A hand brushing his wrist. A quiet hey. A half smile that said stay, without ever saying why. And Aaron stayed. Because leaving something undefined is harder than leaving something broken. A week before his birthday, Aaron tried to bring it up. Not directly. He had never been good at that. They sat across from each other, dinner cooling between them, when Aaron said quietly, "They sent another notice today." Jason didn't look up right away. He finished typing on his phone, set it aside, then met Aaron's eyes. "About the registration?" Aaron nodded. There was a pause, just long enough to matter. Jason leaned back slightly, exhaling like the conversation was already heavier than he wanted it to be. "You're thinking too far ahead." Aaron's fingers tightened around his fork. "I don't think I am." Another pause. Then Jason reached across the table, his touch light, familiar, practiced. "Hey," he said softly, like he always did when Aaron got too close to something real. "You don't have to rush into that." Aaron looked at him, really looked this time. "I don't have time not to." For a split second, something shifted in Jason's expression. Then it was gone. "Those systems aren't made for people like us," he said calmly. A beat. Then, almost as an afterthought, "There are expectations I can't ignore." The words didn't sound like a rejection. They sounded like something worse, something already decided. Aaron swallowed. "Then, we're registering together, right?" Jason didn't answer immediately. He looked at Aaron, then away, then back again, like he was choosing his words, not his feelings. "I'm not ready for that." The sentence landed softly. No anger. No sharp edges. Just distance. Aaron held his gaze. "Not ready for me." Jason shook his head slightly. "I'm not saying no to you." A pause. Then, quieter, almost apologetic. "I just don't want that kind of life yet." It sounded reasonable. It sounded honest. It sounded like something you couldn't argue with. And somehow, that made it worse. Because there was nothing to fight, nothing to fix. Just a decision that didn't include him. Jason squeezed his hand once before letting go, like that small gesture could soften everything he had just said. "If I don't choose you," he added lightly, "who else would I choose?" It should have reassured him. Instead, it felt like something slipping through his fingers. By the time his birthday came, Aaron already knew the answer. He just needed Jason to say it clearly, or to prove him wrong. So he waited, and waited, and waited. until there was nothing left to misunderstand. Around midnight, Aaron picked up his phone again. Not to call this time, just to look. Jason's last message from earlier that day still sat there on the screen. Don't make plans tonight. I'll handle it. Aaron read it once. Then again. Then he set the phone down and finally exhaled, long and slow, like he had been holding that breath for years. I think, he murmured to the empty room, voice barely above a whisper. I finally understand. He didn't need to finish the thought, because the truth was already there, quiet and undeniable. Jason had never been late. Aaron had just never been the priority. His phone lit up again. The system notification returned, bright against the dark. Final notice. Please submit your pairing choice. This time, Aaron opened the app. The interface was clean, impersonal. At the top, select your partner. Jason Miller's name was still there, saved from drafts Aaron had never submitted. For a moment, Aaron just looked at it. 3 years, reduced to a single line of text. Then, without hesitation, he tapped once and removed it. He didn't scroll through other options. Didn't search. Didn't compare. He simply left it blank. At the bottom of the screen, a message appeared. Proceed without preference. Aaron's thumb hovered for only a second. Then yes. The system processed. A loading circle spun, steady, indifferent. Then the confirmation appeared. You have been entered into automatic matching. Aaron closed the app and set the phone aside. Outside, the city kept moving. Inside, for the first time in a long time, he stopped waiting. The result came 3 days later. Aaron Hayes didn't check it immediately. The notification had appeared that morning, quiet, official, inevitable. Matching complete. Please review your assigned partner. It stayed there, untouched, while he moved through his day the same way he had since that night. Slower, quieter, like he was still adjusting to the absence of something that had once filled every corner of his life. In this world, the rules had changed long before Aaron ever paid attention to them. It didn't happen all at once. There was no single announcement, no clear turning point, just a series of adjustments that slowly became something permanent. Birth rates had been falling for years, fewer stable bonds, fewer children, fewer families forming in ways that could sustain the future. At first, the government responded gently. Incentives, support, benefits designed to make it easier for omegas and female betas to choose stability, housing, healthcare, financial protection. Then came stronger protections, priority systems, safeguards that ensured they would never be left without support. But it still wasn't enough. Because choice, left entirely to people, was unpredictable. And unpredictability, over time, became something the system could no longer rely on. So the policy evolved. Omegas and female betas were not forced into specific relationships. Not directly. They were still allowed to choose who they wanted. But they were no longer allowed to avoid choosing. Before the age of 30, every registered omega and eligible female beta had to submit a partner. Someone they trusted. Someone they believed they could build a stable bond with. The system didn't require love. It didn't even require certainty. It only required a decision. And if they didn't make one, if they hesitated, waited, or left it blank, the system would choose for them. Compatibility, genetic balance, psychological alignment, long-term stability. Everything calculated, measured, optimized. Not perfect, but reliable. And once both sides accepted, the bond became official, recognized, protected, supported. If it didn't work, they could leave. Divorce was legal, clean, and protected. No one was trapped. But no one was allowed to stand outside the system. Either. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't kind. It was simply how things worked now. Aaron had always known that. He had just never thought it would apply to him like this. Because for 3 years, he believed he had already made his choice. And that choice would choose him back. By late afternoon, the notification was still there. Aaron stared at it for a long time before finally opening the app. The interface loaded smoothly, unchanged from before. But this time, instead of an empty selection screen, there was a name. Match confirmed. Below it, Luke Bennett. Aaron's eyes lingered on it. Unfamiliar, neutral. Not Jason. Not anyone he knew. Just someone. He exhaled quietly and tapped to open the profile. The information was minimal. Age. Location. Secondary classification, Alpha. Occupation, farmer. Aaron blinked once. Farmer. It wasn't what he had expected. Not that he had expected anything at all, but still. After everything, After 3 years spent beside someone like Jason Miller, this felt distant, simple, almost unreal. There were no long lists of achievements. No mention of status, influence, or connections. Just a few lines. Straightforward. Uncomplicated. And then, below the text, a photo. Aaron hesitated for a moment before letting it load. The image resolved slowly into something steady, grounded, unexpectedly warm. Luke Bennett stood in an open field, land stretching wide behind him under soft sunlight. No sharp tailoring. No polished image. Just a plain shirt, sleeves rolled up, hands that looked like they were used to real work. His expression wasn't smiling, but it wasn't distant either. It was calm. The kind of calm that didn't need to prove anything. Aaron found himself staring a little longer than he meant to. There was nothing striking in the way Jason had been. No sharp edges, no immediate pull, but something about it felt real. In a way he hadn't realized he was missing. He scrolled down. No extended profile. No social links. Just one final line. Match status. Accepted. Aaron's fingers stilled against the screen. Accepted. Not pending. Not undecided. Not waiting. Accepted. Luke Bennett had already agreed. No hesitation recorded. No delay. Just a decision made, on the other side of the system, by someone Aaron had never met. For a moment, Aaron didn't move. He just sat there, phone in hand, the quiet weight of it settling into something deep and unfamiliar. Jason had needed time, needed space, needed reasons. This stranger hadn't asked for any of that. Aaron let out a small breath, almost soundless, and leaned back slightly, eyes still on the screen. He didn't feel relieved. He didn't feel hopeful. But for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like he was waiting either. Outside, the city kept moving, unchanged. Somewhere far from it, beyond glass and concrete, there was land Aaron had never seen, a life he had never imagined, and a person who had already said yes to him, without knowing anything at all. Aaron looked at the name again. Luke Bennett. Then, slowly, he pressed accept. The moment Aaron Hayes pressed accept, the screen dimmed slightly. Confirmation processed, status updated, everything quietly finalized. For a second, nothing happened. Just the faint reflection of his own face staring back at him through the glass. Then his phone rang. Aaron blinked, caught off guard by the sudden sound. The number wasn't saved. He hesitated for only a moment before answering. Hello. There was a brief pause on the other end, just long enough to feel intentional, not awkward. Then a voice came through, low and steady, carrying a calm that didn't need to try too hard. Hi. Is this Aaron Hayes? Aaron straightened slightly without realizing it. Yes. This is Luke Bennett. The name settled into the space between them, real now, no longer just text on a screen. Aaron tightened his grip on the phone just a little. I just accepted the match. I know. Luke replied, the hint of something soft in his tone, not quite a smile, but close. I got the confirmation too. There was no rush in the way he spoke. No pressure. Just a natural, measured pace that made it easy to listen. Easy to respond. I hope this isn't a bad time, Luke continued. I thought it might be better if we talked directly. Aaron leaned back slightly, exhaling a quiet breath he hadn't noticed he was holding. No, it's fine. Another small pause. Not empty, just considerate. Since we've both agreed, Luke said, I wanted to ask, would you be open to relocating? Aaron's eyes drifted toward the window, the city stretching endlessly beyond it. Relocating. We're in different cities, Luke explained calmly. It might be easier if we started in the same place. His tone remained even, almost careful, but only if you're comfortable with that. Aaron didn't answer immediately, not because he needed time to think, but because the answer had already formed before the question finished. There was nothing here for him anymore. Nothing waiting. Nothing holding him back. I can move, he said quietly. If that's okay. It is, Luke replied, just as simply. No hesitation. No overreaction. Just acceptance, again. Aaron swallowed lightly. When would you want me to come? Whenever you're ready. Aaron's fingers tightened slightly around the phone. Then, before he could second-guess himself, tomorrow. There was a brief pause on the other end. Not surprise. Just calculation. All right, Luke said. I'll arrange a flight for you. A beat. Then, more gently. I'm sorry I can't come with you. I'm tied up with work here. Aaron shook his head instinctively, even though Luke couldn't see it. It's fine. I'll meet you at the airport when you land, Luke added. Just send me your details once the ticket is confirmed. Okay. The conversation ended not long after that. No unnecessary words. No awkward silence. Just a clear beginning, set into motion without complication. Aaron lowered the phone slowly. For a moment, he just sat there, letting the quiet settle again. But this time, it felt different. Not empty, just still. He stood up not long after and began to move. There wasn't much to pack. He had never filled this place with things that mattered enough to keep him rooted. A suitcase, a few boxes, clothes, essentials, documents. He worked through it all methodically, stopping only when necessary, canceling services, updating records, closing out the parts of his life that no longer needed to follow him. By evening, everything was ready. The ticket arrived shortly after, clean, efficient, already booked under his name. Departure, the next morning. Aaron stared at it for a moment, then saved it without comment. There was nothing left to delay. The next day passed quickly, too quickly to feel real. By the time he arrived at the airport, everything had already shifted into something irreversible. The terminal buzzed quietly around him, announcements, footsteps, distant conversations blending into something indistinct. Aaron stood near the gate, suitcase beside him, phone in hand. It vibrated once. A message. He almost didn't check it. But habit, old and stubborn, made him look anyway. Jason Miller. Aaron's expression didn't change as he opened it. Happy birthday. Sorry, things got busy. We'll celebrate properly sometime. The words sat there, polished, effortless, completely empty. No mention of the missed night. No acknowledgement of the deadline. No question about where Aaron was, or where he would be. Just enough to sound like something. Aaron stared at the message for a few seconds longer than necessary. Then he opened the reply box. His fingers hovered over the screen. This time, there was no hesitation. Take care, Jason. He paused, then added, don't contact me again. He sent it. Then, without waiting, he opened the settings and blocked the number. Messages, calls, everything. One by one, he removed every remaining thread that connected them. Clean, final, without looking back. When he finished, the screen felt lighter, like something had been cleared that had been there for too long. Aaron slipped the phone back into his pocket as boarding was announced. He picked up his suitcase and stepped forward with the line, moving without pause. There was nothing left for him in this city. No one waiting. No reason to stay. And for the first time in a long time, that didn't hurt. It just meant he was free to leave. The plane landed just after noon. Aaron Hayes didn't rush to stand when the seatbelt sign turned off. He stayed where he was for a moment, fingers loosely resting against the armrest, letting the quiet hum of the cabin settle around him. It didn't feel dramatic. No overwhelming emotions. Just a quiet shift, like something had already ended and something else had begun before he fully noticed. By the time he stepped out into the terminal, the air felt different. Cleaner, slower, less crowded than the city he had left behind. His phone vibrated in his pocket. Aaron pulled it out, glancing at the screen. Evan Reed. He answered almost immediately. Hey. Finally, Evan's voice came through loud and familiar, cutting straight through the calm around him. You disappeared yesterday. I was this close to calling the police. Aaron let out a small breath, the faintest hint of a smile touching his lips. I'm fine. Yeah? Because you picked a hell of a time to go quiet. Evan continued, then didn't wait for a response. Do you know what your ex was doing last night? Aaron's steps slowed slightly, but he didn't stop walking. No. Jason freaking Miller. Evan scoffed, spent half the night chasing down a limited edition diamond, like some ridiculous custom piece, for that Omega from the Harrington family. A pause, then sharper. And guess what? He got turned down. Aaron didn't respond. Flat out rejected. Evan added, almost satisfied. All that effort, all that money, and the guy still said no. The noise of the terminal faded into the background. Aaron kept walking, suitcase rolling quietly beside him. So, Evan continued, voice dropping slightly. Tell me you see it now. Please tell me you're not still waiting on him after that. Aaron exhaled slowly. I think I've been blind for a long time. The words came out calm. No bitterness. Just clarity. Evan went quiet for a second. Then, softer. And the whole matching thing? Aaron adjusted his grip on the handle of his suitcase. It's done. Done. Yeah. A small pause. Then, almost casually, I just got here. Here. My husband's place. Silence. Then you're what? Aaron's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but something close to it. I'll tell you everything later. Evan let out a breath that sounded half like relief, half like disbelief. You know what? Good. Seriously good. You finally dropped that idiot. A beat. Then, warmer. I'm glad, Aaron. Really? Aaron didn't answer, but his silence felt different this time. And hey, Evan added lightly, whoever this guy is, I hope he treats you right. Another pause. Actually, no. He better treat you right. Aaron's grip loosened slightly. I think he will. Evan huffed softly. All right. Go. Live your new life. And call me later, or I'm showing up unannounced. I will. The call ended. Aaron lowered the phone slowly, slipping it back into his pocket. The exit doors were just ahead. Beyond them, open sky, unfamiliar space, and something that didn't feel like the past anymore. He stepped outside, and then he saw him. Luke Bennett stood a short distance away, easy to recognize even among the scattered crowd. Taller than Aaron remembered from the photo, noticeably so. Broad shoulders, solid build, presence grounded in a way that didn't need attention to be noticed. The sunlight caught across him naturally, not staged, not calculated, just there. Real. For a second, Aaron didn't move, because the person standing in front of him felt different from the image he had seen. Warmer. More alive. Luke noticed him almost immediately. Their eyes met. And then, Luke smiled. Not wide. Not exaggerated. Just enough to soften everything about him. He stepped forward, closing the distance with calm, unhurried strides. In his hand was a small bouquet. Simple, fresh, nothing extravagant. He stopped in front of Aaron, holding it out. Welcome. His voice was the same as before, steady, low, easy to listen to. I'm glad you made it. Aaron blinked once, then reached out to take the flowers. Thank you. Luke's gaze lingered on him for just a second, not intrusive, just attentive. Long trip. A little. Let's get you home, Luke said gently, already reaching for Aaron's suitcase before he could respond. Aaron didn't protest. The walk to the car was quiet, but not awkward. Luke moved with a natural ease, opening the door for him, adjusting things without asking, making space without making it feel like effort. Inside the car, the atmosphere remained the same. Calm, unrushed, safe in a way Aaron wasn't used to noticing. Luke started the engine, then glanced at him briefly. You must be tired. Aaron leaned back slightly, the weight of the day settling in now that he had stopped moving. A little. Luke nodded, then reached forward and turned on a soft track, something light, instrumental, barely there but enough to fill the silence. You can rest, he said. We've got some time before we get there. Aaron didn't argue. The steady motion of the car, the quiet music, the absence of pressure, it all settled around him in a way that felt unfamiliar, but not uncomfortable. His eyes closed before he realized it. Time passed, he didn't know how long. Long enough for the tension in his body to loosen, long enough for the noise in his mind to fade into something softer. Then, gently, Aaron. A hand, light against his shoulder, not shaking, just enough to bring him back. We're here. Aaron stirred, blinking slowly as his eyes adjusted. The world outside the window was different. Open, quiet, sunlight stretching across land he had never seen before. For a moment, he didn't move, because something about it felt real in a way he hadn't expected. Not overwhelming, not uncertain, just new. Aaron exhaled softly, pushing himself upright as the last traces of sleep faded. And for the first time since everything had ended, it didn't feel like he was leaving something behind anymore. It felt like he had arrived. For a moment after the car stopped, Aaron Hayes didn't move. The world outside the window didn't feel like something you arrived at. It felt like something you slowly stepped into, as if it had been there long before you and would remain long after. Luke stepped out first, walking around to open the door for him, but Aaron was already looking past him. And then he saw it. The house wasn't just large, it was expansive in a quiet, grounded way. Built from warm cedar wood and pale stone, it blended into the land as if it had grown there naturally over time. The roof sloped gently under dark shingles, catching sunlight in soft layers, while wide glass windows reflected the open sky instead of shutting it out. A wraparound porch stretched along the front, supported by thick wooden beams, a hanging swing shifting slightly with the breeze. It wasn't built to impress. It was built to belong. To the right, a garden spread out in living color, rows of rosemary, basil, and thyme releasing a faint, clean fragrance into the air. Tomatoes ripened under the sun, squash vines curled lazily along the soil, and beyond them, fruit trees stood scattered like quiet witnesses to the passing seasons. Apple, orange, peach, fig, persimmon, some heavy with fruit, some just beginning to bloom. On the left, a fenced space held a small flock of chickens, their soft clucking rising and falling in an unhurried rhythm. A couple of cats lingered nearby, one orange, one gray, one black and white, stretching, blinking, existing entirely on their own terms. And then, movement. A large dog came bounding across the yard, golden brown fur catching the light, its stride powerful but unrestrained. It leapt toward Luke without hesitation, front paws landing solidly against him. Luke barely reacted, one arm lifting naturally to steady the weight. "Hey, easy," he murmured, voice low, familiar. The dog huffed, tail wagging broadly, pressing briefly against him before dropping back down, circling once. Then it turned to Aaron. They looked at each other for a moment. "Aaron," Luke said, resting a hand on the dog's head, "this is Atlas." Atlas tilted its head slightly, studying him. Then, slower this time, it approached. Aaron hesitated, just a second, before lowering his hand. Warm fur met his palm. "Solid. Real. He's friendly," Luke added. "Just enthusiastic." Aaron let out a quiet breath. "I can see that." From the porch, one of the cats jumped down, landing gracefully. "That's Maple," Luke said. "Ash is the gray one. Pepper." He nodded slightly toward the black and white cat. "Doesn't like new people much." Pepper flicked its tail in mild disagreement, but didn't move. The moment settled naturally, like something that didn't need to be arranged. And then, Aaron stepped forward. One step, then another. The ground felt different beneath his feet. Not hard, not distant. The faint scent of soil rose with the warmth of the sun, mixing with the sharp green of herbs, the sweetness of fruit, the clean, open air that carried through everything. A breeze moved past him, not cold, not strong, just enough to brush lightly against his skin, slipping through his hair, quiet but present. Aaron paused. His chest rose slowly as he breathed in, deeper this time. And something shifted. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't overwhelming. It was quiet, like tension he hadn't realized he was carrying had nowhere to hold on to anymore. The noise, the waiting, the constant, subtle ache of being somewhere he didn't quite belong. It loosened, dissolved. The air filled his lungs differently here. The space around him didn't press in, it opened. And for a fleeting moment, standing there between sunlight and soil, between something that had ended and something that had just begun, Aaron felt like he had stepped into another life entirely. Not escaped, not run away, just arrived somewhere he was meant to be. "You okay?" Luke's voice came from behind him, steady, grounding. Aaron turned slightly, meeting his gaze. There was no pressure in it. No expectation, just quiet concern. Aaron nodded once. "Yeah." His voice came out softer than before, but clearer. He looked around again, at the house, the garden, the slow movement of everything that existed without needing to prove itself. Then, almost to himself, "It feels different." Luke followed his gaze, then looked back at him. "It is." A simple answer. No explanation. Aaron exhaled slowly, the last trace of something old leaving with it. And as the quiet settled deeper into him, not empty, not lonely, but full in a way he hadn't known how to name, he realized something he hadn't allowed himself to believe before. This wasn't just a new place. It was a new beginning. And for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was finally here. That evening settled in quietly, the light outside softening as the sun dipped behind the trees. Aaron didn't notice dinner being announced. He noticed it by scent. Something warm, steady, grounding drifted through the house, pulling him gently toward the kitchen without needing to be called. Luke stood by the stove, sleeves rolled up, movements calm and practiced. Nothing rushed, nothing forced, just natural. "You should eat while it's still warm," Luke said, glancing over briefly, not urging, just reminding. Aaron nodded, stepping closer. Okay. The table was already set. Simple but thoughtful. Roasted chicken, a bowl of fresh greens, warm bread. Nothing extravagant, just enough. They sat across from each other, the quiet between them easy rather than uncertain. Luke didn't fill it, didn't ask questions Aaron wasn't ready to answer. He just made sure Aaron's glass was filled, that the food stayed within reach, that nothing felt unattended. If anything's not to your taste, you can tell me, Luke added after a moment, tone casual. Aaron shook his head lightly. It's good. And it was. Not just the food, but the way it was given. After dinner, Luke gathered the dishes without making a point of it. Aaron lingered nearby for a second before stepping back, unsure whether to help, but Luke didn't ask him to. Didn't expect him to. You've had a long day, Luke said instead. You should rest early. A small pause. Then, quieter, the bathroom stocked. Towels are in the cabinet on your left. Aaron nodded slowly. Thank you. Luke hesitated just slightly, like he was considering something, then added, if you're not used to the quiet, you can leave the window cracked. It helps. The words were simple, practical, but there was something in them, something that made Aaron pause for just a second longer than necessary. Okay. When Aaron returned to his room, the space felt softer than before. A small lamp had been left on, casting a warm glow across the wooden floor. A glass of water sat by the bed. The window had been opened just slightly, letting in a slow, steady breeze that carried the scent of earth and leaves. He hadn't asked for any of it, but it had been done. Thought of. Prepared. Aaron sat on the edge of the bed, fingers brushing lightly against the blanket, his gaze lingering on those small details. Not grand gestures. Not anything meant to impress. Just care. Quiet, steady care. There was a light knock on the door. Aaron looked up. Yeah. The door opened just enough for Luke to stand there, not stepping in. I just wanted to check, he said. Are you comfortable? Aaron met his gaze, surprised by the question, not because of the words, but because someone had thought to ask. Yeah, I am. Luke nodded once, relief subtle but present. Good. A brief pause. Then, if you need anything, I'll be downstairs. He hesitated, then added, softer. Get some rest, Aaron. And just before the door closed, good night. The room fell quiet again, but it didn't feel empty. Aaron lay back slowly, eyes drifting to the ceiling. He had expected this to feel strange. A new place, a new life, a person he barely knew. He had expected his mind to stay awake, to question, to doubt, to wait for something to go wrong. But it didn't. The quiet didn't press against him. It held him. The absence of noise didn't feel like something missing. It felt like something finally at peace. And somewhere between the faint rustle of leaves outside, the softness of the sheets beneath him, and the lingering warmth of someone else's care still present in the room, Aaron realized something he hadn't felt in a long time. He wasn't waiting anymore. He wasn't holding on to something unfinished. He was just here. His breathing slowed. His body loosened without effort. And for the first time in a long time, Aaron fell asleep feeling like he had been gently placed somewhere safe. Morning came softer the next day, like the house itself knew not to rush him. Aaron didn't wake all at once. He surfaced slowly, awareness returning in layers. The faint rustle of leaves outside. The muted warmth of sunlight filtering through the curtains. The quiet, steady rhythm of a place that had already begun its day without demanding anything from him. For a few seconds, he stayed still, eyes half closed, listening. And then he realized he had slept through the night. No waking, no drifting in and out, no thoughts pulling him back to something unfinished. Just sleep. Deep, undisturbed, complete. Aaron exhaled softly, something in his chest loosening in a way he hadn't expected. That's new, he murmured to himself. A faint sound came from near the door. He turned his head slightly. Pepper sat there, watching him. Not close, not far, just there, as if he had been there for a while. Aaron blinked, then let out the smallest breath of a laugh. Were you here the whole time? Pepper didn't answer, just flicked his tail once, slow and unimpressed. But he didn't leave either. Aaron pushed himself up, stretching lightly before stepping out of bed. The floor wasn't as cold as yesterday. Or maybe he just noticed it less. When he opened the door, Maple was already waiting. Of course he was. The orange cat immediately slipped past him into the room like he had every right to be there, tail held high. Ash followed more slowly, pausing just long enough to look at Aaron before continuing inside, as if inspecting the space again. Aaron leaned lightly against the doorframe, watching them. I guess I don't have privacy anymore. Maple responded by jumping onto the bed. Pepper, After a moment, walked past him as well, quieter, but no less certain. Aaron shook his head faintly, something soft settling behind his expression. It was nice. Unexpectedly nice. Downstairs, Luke was already awake. The sound of something lightly hitting the pan carried through the space, followed by the faint scent of coffee. Rich, warm, grounding. Aaron stepped into the kitchen, slower this time. Not hesitant, just taking it in. Luke glanced up almost immediately. Morning. Morning. Aaron's voice came easier now, less guarded. Luke studied him for a brief second. Not obvious, not intrusive. Just enough to notice. Did you sleep okay? Aaron paused, then nodded. Yeah, I did. A small shift in Luke's expression, subtle, but there. Good. He turned slightly, reaching for another cup. I made coffee. It's not too strong. Aaron stepped closer, accepting it when Luke handed it over. Their fingers brushed briefly, nothing intentional. Nothing held, but warm. Aaron lowered his gaze for just a second before taking a small sip. It's good. Luke nodded once, as if that was enough. Breakfast will be ready in a minute. Again, no pressure to sit. No expectation to respond. Just information. Aaron leaned lightly against the counter this time instead of standing apart. It was a small shift, but it was there. Maple had already claimed a chair. Ash lingered near the window, watching something outside. Pepper sat further back, observing everything with quiet judgment. Atlas lay near the door, lifting his head slightly when Aaron moved, then resting it back down. Once he seemed satisfied, the space felt lived in. And somehow, Aaron was already part of that picture. After breakfast, Luke said, flipping something in the pan with an easy motion, I thought I could show you around properly. Aaron glanced up. Around. Luke nodded. Just the area nearby? Nothing far. A pause. Only if you want to. There it was again. That space. That choice. Aaron took another sip of coffee, letting the warmth settle before answering. I'd like that. Luke met his gaze briefly, then nodded. All right. No overreaction. No unnecessary words. Just agreement. And somehow, that made it feel more real. Aaron looked around the room again. The quiet movement of everything. The soft morning light. The small, steady presence of a life that didn't demand but simply existed. Yesterday, it had felt like something new. Something unfamiliar but beautiful. Today, it felt a little closer. Not completely his. Not yet. But no longer distant either. And as he stood there, coffee warming his hands, the quiet settling into something that felt less like silence and more like belonging, Aaron realized, without needing to say it out loud, he didn't feel like he was visiting anymore. Life didn't stay quiet. It stayed calm, but not still. The countryside had its own way of showing up when you least expected it. The first time, it was just a sound. A sudden scrape against the window while Aaron was writing. Not loud, but close. Too close. He froze, pen hovering above the page. The sound came again. Something brushing, shifting right outside the glass. Luke. No answer. The house felt bigger in that moment. Quieter in a way that made everything sharper. Aaron stood, taking a cautious step toward the window, then stopped when the bush outside shook hard. Something jumped. He flinched back instinctively and ran straight into something solid behind him. A hand caught his arm before he could stumble. Hey. Luke's voice. Close. Grounded. Aaron's breath hitched once before settling. There's something outside. Luke glanced past him, calm as ever. Raccoon. Aaron blinked. That big. Luke opened the door, stepping out without hesitation. Aaron stayed inside, watching as Luke crouched slightly, speaking in that same low, steady tone. The movement outside slowed, then disappeared into the trees. Luke stepped back in like it was nothing. Aaron stared at him. You just handled that like it was normal. Luke shrugged. It is. A beat. Did it scare you? Aaron hesitated, then nodded. Yeah. Luke's gaze softened just a fraction. You'll get used to it. Not dismissing. Not teasing. Just certain. Aaron exhaled, tension easing. I hope so. The second time was worse. It happened at night. A heavy thud against the wall. Then something dragging slowly across the wood. Aaron woke instantly, heart racing. The dark felt thicker here. The silence deeper. Another sound. Closer. Sharper. He didn't think this time. He crossed the hallway and knocked. Quick, uneven. Luke. The door opened almost immediately. Luke looked half awake, but the moment he saw Aaron, something in his expression sharpened. What's wrong? There's something outside. Luke listened. The sound came again, then stopped. He exhaled lightly. Probably a loose branch. Aaron didn't move. Luke noticed. Do you want me to check? Aaron shook his head quickly. No. A small pause. Then, quieter. Can I stay here? Luke stepped aside without hesitation. Yeah. No questions. No surprise. Aaron stepped in, hovering near the edge of the room. Luke checked the window, then pulled the curtain slightly. It's nothing, he said. You're okay. Aaron nodded. But he didn't leave. Luke glanced at the bed, then back at him. You can take it. I'll use the couch. Aaron frowned faintly. That's not necessary. A beat. Then, softer, we can just share. Luke held his gaze for a second, just enough to make sure. Then nodded. All right. They lay down with space between them. Careful. Intentional. Not touching. Aaron's breathing was uneven at first, shoulders still tight. Then, slowly, it eased. And at some point in the night, without either of them noticing when, that distance between them closed. Not completely, but enough. Enough that it didn't feel like sharing a space with a stranger anymore. Enough that the quiet didn't feel empty. The days shifted after that. Aaron moved more easily through the house. Not just existing, but living in it. He started cooking without being asked. The first time was simple. The second time, better. Luke noticed. You cook? Aaron glanced over his shoulder. A little. Luke took a bite. Paused. Then looked at him again. This is better than mine. Aaron huffed quietly. That's a low bar. Luke didn't argue. From then on, it became natural. Aaron cooked more. Luke handled everything else. No discussion. No arrangement. It just fit. Aaron started following Luke outside more too. At first, just watching. Then asking. Then trying. The work was real, hands-on, grounded. Not easy, but not overwhelming. It felt honest. One afternoon, Luke took him further out. Past the smaller fields Aaron had gotten used to. Past the fences. And then the land opened up. Wide. Structured. More than a small farm. Much more. Aaron slowed. This is all yours. Luke didn't make a big deal out of it. Most of it. Aaron looked at him. Really looked this time. You didn't mention it. Luke met his gaze, steady. It didn't seem important. Aaron didn't respond immediately. Something shifted, quiet, but clear. He had misjudged him. Completely. You're not just a farmer. Luke shrugged slightly. I am. A pause. I just have more land. Aaron let out a small breath. That's one way to say it. Later, Aaron noticed other things. Supplies that didn't get sold. Deliveries sent elsewhere. People mentioning Luke helping, quietly, consistently. Aaron asked once. You help them? Luke didn't look at him this time. When I can. Why? A small pause. Because I can. Simple. No need to explain. Aaron nodded slowly. I like that. Luke glanced at him then, just for a second. Something unreadable, but not distant. Yeah? Aaron nodded. Yeah. The space between them had changed. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. Just steadily. Standing a little closer. Staying a second longer before stepping away. And sometimes, when Aaron got close enough, he noticed it. Warm. Grounded. Faint, but there. Luke's scent. It didn't overwhelm him. Didn't pull. It just settled quietly around him, like everything else here. And his body responded before. He could think. His shoulders loosened. His breathing slowed. Like something in him recognized it, before he did. Aaron didn't say anything. Neither did Luke. But neither of them stepped away as quickly anymore. And that, somehow, said enough. Their days found a rhythm without either of them forcing it. Luke left early some mornings, not always at the same time, but always with the same quiet steadiness, checking a few things, taking calls outside, occasionally driving out to parts of the land Aaron hadn't fully explored yet. He never made it sound complicated. Never made it sound important. Just work. Aaron didn't ask too much at first. He simply watched the way Luke moved, efficient, grounded, respected without needing to say why. People called him, relied on him, and Luke answered the same way he did everything else, calm, direct, without making it bigger than it needed to be. Aaron's work looked different, slower on the surface, but just as full. He started writing again, not because he had to, but because something here made it easier. The quiet wasn't empty. It gave him space to think, to feel, to notice things he used to overlook. The way morning light changed across the porch. The sound of leaves brushing against each other at night. The way Atlas would rest near his feet without asking. and how Maple always found a way into his lap at the worst possible moment. It all became material. He didn't try too hard. The words came on their own. One page, then another, and before he realized it, he had something solid again. When he sent the first draft in, he didn't expect much. He hadn't written like this in a long time. But the response came back faster than expected. Strong. Clear. His editor didn't hold back. "This is different," the message read. "Keep going." Aaron stared at the screen for a long moment before setting the phone down. Something quiet settled in his chest, not excitement, not pressure, just confirmation that he was moving in the right direction. That evening, Luke came back a little later than usual. Aaron was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, finishing something he had started earlier. Luke paused at the doorway for a second, watching. "Smells good." Aaron didn't turn right away. "You always say that." Luke stepped closer, setting his keys aside. "Because it always does." Aaron glanced at him then, just briefly. "I sent my draft today." Luke nodded, like he had been expecting that. "Yeah." They liked it. A small pause. Luke's expression shifted, subtle, but warmer. "I'm not surprised." Aaron blinked slightly. "You didn't even read it." Luke met his gaze. "I don't need to." The answer came too easily, too certain. Aaron looked away first this time, something unfamiliar settling just beneath the surface. "You're very confident." Luke's voice stayed steady. "And you?" "Yeah." Aaron didn't respond. But the words stayed. They always did. That night, Luke didn't bring them inside to eat. Instead, he led Aaron out to the back of the house, where the air had cooled and the sky stretched wide and clear above them. A small table had been set up near the garden. Nothing elaborate. Just enough. "You did all this?" Aaron asked, glancing around. Luke shrugged lightly. "Thought we could eat out here." The lights were simple, soft, warm, strung loosely along the edge of the porch. The rest came from the sky. Open, quiet, full of stars Aaron hadn't realized he had been missing. They sat across from each other at first. Then, somewhere between passing plates and quiet conversation, that distance shortened. Not deliberately, just naturally. Luke reached over once to brush something off Aaron's sleeve. His hand lingered a second too long. Aaron didn't move away. Later, when Aaron stood to grab something from inside, Luke's hand found his wrist, light, instinctive. "Careful," he said, nodding toward the step. Aaron paused, then nodded. "Right." But neither of them pulled away immediately. It became like that. Small things. Unplanned. Unspoken. A hand at his back when passing through a doorway. Fingers brushing when handing something over. The kind of contact that didn't need permission, but never crossed into something that felt too much. And slowly, Aaron stopped thinking about it. It didn't feel like something new anymore. It felt expected. The next morning, Luke brought back a basket. Not store-bought. Fresh. Still carrying the faint scent of the trees they came from. "From the south field," he said, setting it down. Aaron leaned closer, looking inside. Peaches. A few early apples. Something smaller, deeper red. "These are good." Luke nodded. "You'll like them." Aaron picked one up, turning it in his hand. "We're not selling these?" Luke shook his head. "Not these." A small pause. "These are ours." Aaron didn't say anything for a moment. Then, okay. Later that day, the kitchen filled with something sweeter. Softer. Aaron worked with quiet focus, slicing, mixing, adjusting without needing to think too much about it. Luke passed through once, then paused again at the doorway. "Watching. You're turning all of that into something else." Aaron didn't look up. "Isn't that what you do too?" Luke didn't answer right away, but something about that stayed with him. Their lives didn't overlap completely. They didn't need to. Luke had his world, wide, structured, quietly powerful. Aaron had his, introspective, observant, slowly rebuilding. But somewhere in between, they met. In the kitchen, on the porch, in quiet conversations that didn't need to go anywhere to matter. And over time, without either of them noticing exactly when it happened, Aaron started leaning in more. Not physically at first, just in small ways. Waiting for Luke before starting something. Asking without realizing he was asking. Letting the silence stretch because he knew Luke would fill it if needed, or leave it alone if not. And Luke never once made that feel like a burden. If anything, he met it. Steady, unmoving, always there. And slowly, Aaron stopped holding himself up the way he used to. Not because he couldn't anymore, but because he didn't have to. They didn't wait until the last day. The notice had already been issued, 30 days from confirmation. That was the window. After that, the system would step in automatically. Luke brought it up over breakfast, the same way he brought up everything else. Calm, direct, without pressure. "We still have time," he said, setting a cup down in front of Aaron. "But I thought it might be easier if we go early." Aaron looked at the paper beside his plate. Official. Clear. No urgency written in it, but the meaning was there. He nodded after a second. "Okay." Luke didn't say more. He just shifted the conversation back to something simple, what Aaron wanted to cook later, whether the weather would hold. Like this wasn't something heavy. Like it didn't need to be. They left not long after. The town looked the same as always, slow, familiar, unhurried. Nothing about it suggested that today was different. And maybe that was why Aaron didn't feel the weight of it the way he thought he would. Inside the office, everything was already prepared. Luke had taken care of most of it. The forms were filled where they could be. Documents organized neatly. Even the appointment had been set in advance. Aaron glanced at him briefly. "You did all this already?" Luke adjusted the folder in his hand. "Just the basics." A small pause. "If anything feels off, we can stop." Aaron held his gaze for a moment, then nodded. "All right." They sat side by side at the desk, close enough to feel each other's presence, but not touching. The staff member walked them through the process in a steady, practiced tone. Nothing complicated, nothing unexpected, just signatures, confirmation, a quiet, official recognition of something they had already agreed to. Aaron picked up the pen. For a second, his fingers paused, not because he doubted, but because this felt real in a way that didn't need to be dramatic to matter. Then he signed. Smooth. No hesitation. When Luke signed next to him, it was just as steady. No pause. No second thought. Just two names placed side by side. Equal, simple, certain. "That's it," the staff member said with a small smile. "You're all set." They stepped back outside. The air felt the same. The sky unchanged. Nothing had shifted around them. But something had settled inside Aaron, quiet, but clear. Luke didn't comment on it. He didn't turn it into a moment. He just glanced at Aaron briefly. "You okay?" Aaron nodded. "Yeah." A small pause. Then, "That was easier than I thought." Luke's expression softened slightly. "It usually is." They started walking back toward the car. Not in a hurry. Not lingering either. Just moving. At the same pace. Halfway there, Luke reached out. Not abruptly, not deliberate enough to feel planned, and lightly caught Aaron's wrist. Aaron paused, looking down at the contact for a split second before looking back up. Luke's hand didn't tighten, didn't pull. It just stayed there, steady, warm. "Careful," he said quietly, nodding toward a slight step in the pavement. Aaron followed his gaze, then gave a small nod. "Right." But neither of them moved immediately. The contact lingered for a second longer than necessary. Just long enough for Aaron to notice something shift. Not sudden, not overwhelming. Just there. Luke released him first, like always. Aaron's hand dropped back to his side, but the warmth didn't leave as quickly. They got into the car without saying anything about it. The engine started. The road stretched out ahead, the same as before. But the space between them felt different. Not smaller, just more aware. Aaron leaned back slightly, gaze drifting out the window. The town passed by in quiet motion. People, trees, familiar shapes. And yet, everything felt a little clearer. Like something had settled into place without needing to be named. He didn't feel trapped. Didn't feel rushed. Didn't feel like he had given something up. If anything, it felt like he had stepped into something he didn't have to question anymore. Aaron glanced sideways for a brief moment. Luke's hands rested steady on the wheel, expression calm, unchanged. The same as always. And somehow, that steadiness felt more reassuring than anything else. Aaron looked away again, a faint exhale leaving him. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Because for the first time, this wasn't something he was trying to understand. It was something he was simply living. It happened on a normal afternoon. Aaron was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, finishing a batch of something sweet with the fruit Luke had brought back that morning. The house was quiet in that familiar way, soft, steady, predictable, until it wasn't. The front door opened without warning. "Luke." The voice came first, bright, loud, completely unfiltered. Aaron froze for half a second, then turned. A young Omega stood at the entrance, slightly out of breath, eyes already scanning the space like he had every right to be there. And then his gaze landed on Aaron. The air shifted. "You're him?" The tone wasn't hostile. Not exactly. But it wasn't welcoming either. Aaron straightened slightly, instinctively aware of the change. And you are? The Omega didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked further in, looking around like he was confirming something for himself. I leave for a few weeks, and you get married? He said, voice rising as he turned toward the hallway. Luke. Footsteps approached from outside. Luke stepped in, wiping his hands lightly against a cloth, expression calm. But it changed the moment he saw who it was. Ethan. So that was his name. Ethan turned immediately, crossing the space without hesitation and grabbing onto Luke's arm like it was the most natural thing in the world. You didn't tell me anything, he said, almost accusing. I had to hear it from someone else. Luke didn't pull away right away, but he didn't respond to the contact either. You've been busy, he said evenly. I didn't think you'd come back this quickly. Ethan huffed. Of course I came back. You think I'd just sit there after hearing you got a partner? The words sounded heavier in his mouth. More personal. More something else. Aaron stayed where he was, watching. Not interrupting. Not stepping forward. Just observing. Ethan's attention shifted again, back to him. Slower this time. More deliberate. So this is him. He stepped closer. Too close. Aaron didn't move. He doesn't look like your type. Ethan added, tone light but edged. Luke's voice cut in, calm but firmer. That's enough. Ethan blinked, then laughed it off like it didn't matter. What? I'm just saying. But he didn't step back. Instead, he leaned slightly toward Luke again, almost casually resting his shoulder against him. Too familiar. Too practiced. You used to say you didn't want to be tied down, Ethan added, glancing sideways at him. What changed? Aaron felt it then. Not sharp. Not overwhelming. Just there. Something tight, low in his chest. Unfamiliar. But unmistakable. He didn't speak right away. He didn't react. But when Ethan's hand lifted slightly, like he was about to touch Luke again, something in Aaron shifted before he could think it through. He's my husband. The words came out steady. Clear. Not loud. But they didn't need to be. The room went quiet for a second. Ethan stilled. Luke didn't move. Aaron held his gaze, calm, even as his own heartbeat picked up just slightly. So maybe keep some distance. Ethan blinked. Once. Then twice. Like the words had taken a second longer to land than they should have. Luke spoke next. Quiet. Controlled. But unmistakably firm. Ethan. Just his name. But it was enough. Ethan's expression shifted. Confusion. Then something softer, something smaller. You're serious? Luke met his gaze. I am. A pause. Then, more clearly. Aaron is my partner. My husband. The words settled differently when Luke said them. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't emphasize. But there was no space left for misunderstanding. I've always treated you like family, Luke continued. But that doesn't give you the right to disrespect him. Ethan looked down briefly, jaw tightening. I didn't. You did, Luke said, not harsh, but not letting it go either. A small silence followed. Then, quieter. If you can't respect him, then you shouldn't come here. That landed. Ethan's shoulders dropped slightly, the fight draining out of him as quickly as it had appeared. I didn't mean it like that. His voice was lower now, less certain. He glanced at Aaron, just briefly. Sorry. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't smooth. But it was real enough. Aaron didn't respond immediately. Then, after a moment, it's fine. Ethan nodded once, still looking a little unsettled. Then turned back to Luke, something unspoken lingering for just a second longer, before he stepped away. I'll go back tomorrow, he muttered. Luke didn't stop him. Didn't soften the boundary he had already set. Ethan hesitated at the door, then left just as abruptly as he had arrived. The house fell quiet again, but not the same kind of quiet as before. This one lingered. Aaron exhaled slowly, only then realizing his shoulders had tensed at some point. He's not a bad kid, Luke said after a moment. Aaron glanced at him. Luke's tone had softened again, back to what Aaron was used to. He's just been given too much without being told no. Aaron nodded slightly. I figured. A small pause. Then, quieter. Sorry about earlier. Luke looked at him. For what? Aaron hesitated. What I said. Luke stepped closer. Not rushed. Not sudden. Just steady. Then, without warning, his hand lifted, fingers brushing lightly against Aaron's before holding them. Warm. Firm. Grounding. Aaron's breath caught slightly. Luke didn't let go. Instead, he leaned in just enough, pressing a soft, brief kiss against Aaron's forehead. Aaron froze for a second, completely unprepared for it. I liked it, Luke said quietly. Aaron blinked. What? Luke met his gaze. What you said. A small pause. Then, softer, you're right. Aaron's fingers tightened slightly in his grip without realizing it. Luke's thumb brushed lightly against the back of his hand. We're married, he continued. You're not just staying here. Another pause. This is your home too. Aaron didn't say anything. He couldn't, not immediately. Something warm spread through his chest, slow, unfamiliar, but undeniable. You're my partner. Luke's voice dropped slightly. My husband. The words didn't feel distant anymore. They didn't feel like something formal. They felt real. Aaron's gaze lowered for a second, then lifted again. And this time, he didn't hold back. He stepped forward, closing the distance himself. Just enough to rest lightly against Luke. Not hiding, not unsure. Just there. Luke didn't move away, didn't question it. His arm came up naturally, steadying Aaron without tightening too much. Aaron exhaled slowly, eyes closing just for a second. Somewhere between embarrassment and something softer, something that felt a lot like happiness. And for once, he didn't try to step back from it. After dinner, just when Aaron had finally started to relax into the noise and warmth of the house, one of Luke's younger brothers dropped into the empty chair beside him like he had been waiting all night for the right moment. He looked younger than the others, barely out of college, maybe, all restless energy and badly hidden curiosity, with the kind of grin that already promised trouble. I'm Pete, he said, holding out a hand far too solemnly for someone whose eyes were sparkling like that. Youngest. Favorite child. Smartest one here. That is objectively false, Emma called from across the table without even looking up. Ignore them, Pete said immediately, leaning closer to Aaron as if they were already allies. Anyway, I just wanted to say welcome. And also, he lowered his voice dramatically, glancing once at Luke before looking back at Aaron. I have questions. Aaron blinked, barely holding back a smile. I'm guessing Luke won't like that. Luke doesn't like joy, Pete said gravely. Which is why I'm doing this now, before he stops me. Aaron glanced at Luke, who was currently reaching for a dish on the other side of the table, seemingly not paying attention at all. He can definitely hear you, Aaron said. That's fine, Pete replied, unconcerned. He should know I'm fighting for transparency in this family. Then he tilted his head, studying Aaron openly for a second. So, were you this pretty when he met you? Or is this specifically for dinner? Aaron nearly choked on his drink. Across from them, Emma laughed out loud. Luke looked up this time. Pete. Just one word. Calm. Flat. A warning. Pete held up both hands. What? I'm being nice. Then, before Luke could say anything else, he turned right back to Aaron. Did he tell you he used to be worse? Aaron blinked. Worse. Emotionally, Pete said. Not visually. That'd be impressive. Aaron had to look away for a second, because the laugh came out before he could stop it. Luke set his fork down. You done? Not even close, Pete said cheerfully. I've waited years for this. Then he leaned toward Aaron again, lowering his voice like he was about to share state secrets. You should know, this is the first time Luke has ever brought anyone here looking like that. Aaron frowned slightly. Looking like what? Pete's grin widened. Like he actually cares whether someone likes him back. For the first time all evening, Luke moved fast enough to make it obvious. His hand came down lightly but firmly on the back of Pete's chair. Outside, he said. Pete looked up at him, scandalized. You can't silence the truth. Watch me. Aaron, Pete said quickly, twisting around in his seat to point accusingly at Luke. This is what I mean. He acts all calm, but deep down, he's a tyrant. Aaron looked between them, then said with a straight face, I'm starting to see that. Pete slapped the table in triumph. See? He gets me. Luke exhaled through his nose, not quite annoyed enough to be serious. You're enjoying this too much. Absolutely, Pete said. I've prayed for days like this. Then he turned back to Aaron again, this time with a little less teasing and something more genuine beneath it. Seriously though, it's good to meet you. He looks different with you here. Aaron's expression softened before he could help it. Different how? Pete glanced once at Luke, then shrugged. Less like he's carrying the whole planet by himself. The table quieted for just a second after that. Not fully, just enough. Aaron's eyes flicked instinctively toward Luke. Luke, who had already picked his fork back up, looked almost exactly the same as before, steady, composed, unreadable to anyone who didn't know him. But Aaron did know him a little now, enough to catch the faint shift in his shoulders, enough to notice that he hadn't interrupted this time. Pete, apparently deciding he had made the room serious for long enough, suddenly brightened again. "Anyway," he said, grabbing a piece of bread from the basket, "if you ever need dirt on him, I have stories. Embarrassing ones. Very useful in negotiations." "Pete," Luke said again, but there was less warning in it now. "What?" "Married people should share information." He bit into the bread, chewed once, then added around it. "Also, if he ever annoys you, just tell Mom. She'll destroy him emotionally in under 5 minutes." "That's enough," Luke said, reaching over to take the bread basket away from him entirely. Pete gasped like a man betrayed. "See? Oppression." Aaron laughed again, quieter this time but warmer, and Luke's gaze shifted to him almost immediately. Brief, subtle, but there. It stayed only a second before moving away, yet it was enough. Pete saw it too. Of course he did, and his expression turned unbearably pleased. "Oh," he said, pointing between them. "Oh, this is bad." Aaron frowned, still smiling. "What?" Pete leaned back dramatically. "You're both gone. That's the problem." "There is no problem," Luke said flatly. "There is absolutely a problem," Pete said. "It's just not my problem, which is why I'm having such a great time." Emma threw a napkin at him. Their mother told him to stop talking with his mouth full. Their father finally looked up from his plate just long enough to say, "You've been having a great time since birth," in the driest tone possible, which made the entire table break into laughter. And somewhere in the middle of all that noise, Pete still talking, Emma rolling her eyes, their mother complaining while secretly smiling, Luke trying and failing to look unaffected, Aaron felt it again. That strange, quiet warmth that had started settling into him little by little. Not the overwhelming kind. Not the kind that frightened him. Just the steady realization that this was no longer something he was standing outside of, watching from a distance. He was in it now. In the noise. In the teasing. In the warmth of a family that had already begun making space for him like he belonged there. And when Pete leaned over one last time to whisper, loudly enough for everyone to hear, "If you survive this family, you can survive anything," Aaron looked down to hide his smile, only for his hand to brush lightly against Luke's beneath the table. It wasn't intentional. At least, not at first. But neither of them moved away. And across from them, Pete saw everything, narrowed his eyes like a detective solving a case, and pointed dramatically. "Uh-huh." Luke didn't even look up. "Pete." "I said nothing." Pete replied immediately, grinning like he had just won something. The house had gone quiet by the time they returned to their room. The kind of quiet that only came after a long, noisy day, soft, settled, lingering in the walls. Aaron stood by the bed for a moment, fingers brushing lightly over the fabric as if grounding himself in something real. Behind him, the door clicked shut. Luke stepped in, unhurried as always, but the space between them felt different tonight. Closer, more defined. Aaron turned slightly, exhaling a small breath. "Your family is a lot." Luke's lips curved faintly. That's the gentlest way anyone's ever said that. Aaron let out a quiet laugh, but it faded quickly, replaced by something softer, something more aware. "It's nice," he admitted. Luke didn't answer right away. He just looked at him. Really looked this time, steady, focused, like there was nothing else in the room that mattered. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. Aaron nodded, though his voice came softer than usual. "Yeah." A pause. Then, honest, just thinking. "About." Aaron hesitated for half a second, then met his eyes. "About us." Something shifted. Subtle, but undeniable. Luke stepped closer, not enough to startle, just enough to close the distance that no longer felt necessary. His hand lifted, slow, deliberate, giving Aaron all the time in the world to pull away. Aaron didn't. Fingers brushed against his cheek, warm, grounding. Aaron's heartbeat stumbled for a second, then steadied, falling into something quieter, something deeper. Luke leaned in first. The kiss was soft at first, just a gentle press of lips, warm and certain. Not rushed, not testing, just real. Aaron stilled for the briefest moment, then leaned into it, answering without hesitation. His fingers curled into Luke's shirt, holding on without thinking, as if anchoring himself to the feeling. Luke's hand shifted to the back of his neck, firm but careful, keeping him close without ever forcing it. The kiss deepened slowly, naturally, the warmth building between them. Not overwhelming, just enough to make everything else fade into the background. No rush, no urgency, just the quiet certainty of something that had already taken root long before this moment. When they finally pulled back, it wasn't because they wanted to, just because they needed air. Aaron's forehead rested lightly against Luke's, his breath uneven but soft. So this is what it feels like. Luke's thumb brushed along his jaw, slower now, more deliberate. Yeah. And this time, there was no distance left between them. It started a few days later. Aaron noticed it before Luke said anything. The signs were subtle, at first. A quiet tension beneath the surface. Movements a little sharper. Breathing just slightly off rhythm. Luke wasn't careless. Not once. But he was holding something back, and Aaron could feel it in every small shift. By evening, Luke stopped him near the doorway. Aaron. His voice was lower than usual. Controlled, but not as effortless as before. Aaron turned immediately. What is it? Luke didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, carefully, it's starting. Aaron understood. Rut. The word didn't need to be said. Luke's jaw tightened just slightly. I'll stay in the other room tonight. A pause. I'll lock the door. Aaron frowned. No. Luke looked up. No. Aaron stepped closer. Not impulsive. Not uncertain. Just steady. You're not locking yourself away. Luke's control flickered. Not breaking, but strained. Aaron, I don't want to risk. I know what it is, Aaron said calmly. And I know what I'm choosing. Luke searched his face, looking for hesitation. There wasn't any. You don't have to do this. I'm your partner, Aaron replied, voice quiet but firm. A brief pause. Then softer. Not just on paper. That landed. Luke's breath hitched, just slightly. Are you sure? This time, Aaron didn't even pause. I am. Silence stretched between them. Then Luke exhaled slowly, like something inside him finally gave way, not to instinct, but to trust. Then stay, he said. That night wasn't about losing control. It was about holding on to it, together. The air felt warmer, heavier, Luke's presence closer, more tangible than before. His scent was stronger now, steady, grounding, impossible to ignore. But even then, he held back, every movement measured, every touch careful, checking without words that Aaron was still there, still choosing this. And Aaron never stepped away. Not once. He stayed close, closer than before, letting that warmth wrap around him, steady instead of overwhelming. Time blurred, not into something chaotic, but into something quiet and continuous, like a tide that rose and fell without breaking. When it finally eased, the tension leaving as gradually as it had come, what remained was something softer, warmer, real. They lay in the dim light, the world outside completely still. Aaron shifted slightly, instinctively moving closer, his head resting against Luke's shoulder. Luke's arm came around him without hesitation, holding him there. Not tightly, just enough. You stayed, Luke said quietly. Aaron let out a soft breath, eyes half closed. Of course I did. A small pause. Then, almost shy. Where else would I go? Luke's hand moved through his hair, slower now, grounding. Aaron. Luke's voice dropped, softer than Aaron had ever heard it. I'm glad it's you. Aaron smiled faintly against him, something warm settling deep inside his chest. Me too. Silence lingered, not empty, just full. Then, almost like a promise Luke hadn't planned to say out loud. I love you. Aaron stilled, not because he was surprised, but because hearing it like this, quiet, certain, made it real in a way nothing else had. He lifted his head slightly, meeting Luke's gaze. His breath caught for a second, then steadied. A small pause. Then softer. I love you too. This time, when he leaned in, the kiss was even gentler than before. Not new, not uncertain, just theirs. And somewhere between the fading warmth of everything they had just shared and the quiet certainty settling into place between them, Aaron realized this wasn't something fragile anymore. It wasn't something he had to question. It was something that had already rooted itself deep enough that even silence couldn't shake it. And for the first time, he didn't wonder how long it would last. He just stayed. Luke didn't move right away after saying Jason's name. The room stayed quiet for a beat longer than usual, the weight of it settling, not heavy, but clear. Aaron watched him, then let out a slow breath, fingers still resting lightly against Luke's hand. "There's something I should tell you," he said. Luke's gaze shifted to him immediately, not sharp, not questioning, just attentive. Aaron didn't rush it. He pulled out the chair beside him and sat down, gesturing lightly for Luke to do the same. "Jason doesn't build things himself," Aaron began, voice calm, steady. "He borrows power, connections, people who already have something to lose." Luke didn't interrupt. Aaron glanced at the table for a second, like he was sorting through old memories, not avoiding them, just choosing how to lay them out. "When I was with him, I thought he was just, well connected," he continued. "But it wasn't that simple." A faint pause. "He invests in people early, helps them when they're still small enough to need him. Then he keeps a peace." Luke's fingers stilled slightly under Aaron's hand. "Leverage," he said. Aaron nodded. "Exactly." The words came easier than Aaron expected. Not because they didn't matter, but because they didn't hold the same weight anymore. "He doesn't like risk," Aaron added. "Not real risk. Everything he does is calculated to look like someone else's mistake." Luke leaned back slightly, thinking. "So he stays one step removed." "Always," Aaron said. "And if something goes wrong, there's always someone else to take the fall." A small silence followed. Then Aaron's gaze lifted again, sharper now. "But he has a pattern." Luke looked at him. "He trusts people who owe him," Aaron said. "Not the strongest, the most dependent." He paused briefly, then added, "There was one logistics manager he used a lot, not officially tied to him, but always there when something needed to move quietly." Luke's expression shifted, just slightly. "Recognition. Name?" he asked. Aaron didn't hesitate. He gave it. That was enough. Luke stood immediately, already moving before the thought had fully settled. Aaron followed without needing to be asked. The next few hours blurred into something sharper, more focused. Data pulled, records cross-checked, patterns that had been invisible before now lining up cleanly once they knew where to look. Aaron didn't stay on the outside. He worked beside Luke, not guessing, not assuming, remembering, connecting pieces that only made sense because he had seen them before, even if he hadn't understood them at the time. "He won't touch anything directly," Aaron said at one point, leaning slightly over Luke's shoulder. "But he'll repeat what works." Luke nodded once, already tracing the repetition through the logs. "And that's where he gets predictable." The breakthrough came faster after that. Not because it was easy, but because they were no longer looking blindly. The intermediary, the routing pattern, the same quiet signature hidden across multiple disruptions. Luke stopped when it all aligned. Aaron felt it before he saw it. The shift in the room, the moment something clicked into place. "That's him," Luke said quietly. Aaron didn't question it. He didn't need to. Because this time, Jason wasn't just a shadow behind the damage. He was a pattern, a structure, something they could map, follow, and break. Aaron's hand moved instinctively, resting against Luke's wrist again. Grounding. Familiar. Luke glanced at it briefly, then back at the screen. "We can use this," Luke said. Aaron nodded slowly. "We will." And for the first time, the past Aaron had once tried to leave behind wasn't something chasing him anymore. It was something he could turn around and use. Luke didn't act immediately, not in any way that could be seen from the outside. But this time, the stillness felt different. It wasn't waiting anymore. It was positioning. Aaron recognized it now, the quiet before something deliberate. They didn't talk much that night. They didn't need to. Aaron stayed beside him, occasionally reading through files Luke pushed over, cross-checking names that felt vaguely familiar. Atlas lay stretched across the floor between them, one eye half open like he was keeping watch, while Milo had claimed the corner of Aaron's laptop, completely uninterested in the tension building around him. "He'll expect you to cut the channel," Aaron said after a while, eyes still on the screen. Luke glanced at him. "And when I don't?" Aaron leaned back slightly, thinking. "Then he'll push harder. Faster. He'll think you're scrambling." A small pause. Then Aaron's gaze sharpened. "That's when he'll overstep." Luke held his eyes for a second longer, then nodded once. That was enough. The next morning, Luke did exactly what Jason expected him not to do. Nothing changed. The same route stayed open. The same weak point remained exposed. If anything, the system looked more fragile than before. One more delay. One more discrepancy. Enough to make it look like things were slipping further out of control. But behind it, everything shifted. Luke started isolating access, quietly removing people from certain parts of the chain. Not enough to alert suspicion, just enough to narrow the path. Every move became smaller, tighter, until there was only one way left for the interference to travel. Aaron watched it happen in real time, not guessing anymore, understanding. He adjusted alongside Luke without needing to be told, flagging inconsistencies, pulling old contacts, confirming which names still held weight and which ones had already started pulling away from Jason. He won't risk losing everyone, Aaron said at one point. Luke didn't look up. No. So he'll double down on the ones who can't leave, Aaron added. That was the piece that locked it in. By the third day, the pressure point was clear. The same intermediary, the same narrow channel, the same repeated attempt to force the system to collapse from the inside. Luke didn't block it. He waited. Then he let it through, just far enough. The shipment moved. Clean. Controlled. Watched from every angle. And right before it reached the point where Jason would normally disappear behind someone else, Luke closed it. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just completely. No reroute. No fallback. No cover left in place. The chain broke. And this time, there was no one left to absorb the impact. Jason appeared the same day. Not invited. Not announced. But expected. He stepped into the space like he still owned it. Same polished presence. Same controlled expression. But the timing betrayed him. Too fast. Too reactive. You've been busy, Jason said lightly, eyes moving between them. Luke didn't respond. Aaron didn't look away. For a second, Jason's gaze lingered on Aaron. Sharper this time. More deliberate. You always did have a talent for choosing the wrong side, he said, voice edged with quiet disdain. Aaron didn't react. Not the way he used to. His expression stayed calm, almost neutral. I chose the right one, he said simply. Something flickered in Jason's eyes. Irritation, quickly buried. Luke stepped forward, not in. Front, not blocking Aaron. Just enough to stand beside him. Close enough that the line between them didn't exist. It's over, Luke said. Jason let out a short breath that almost sounded like a laugh. You think cutting one route does anything? Luke didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, check your phone. Jason didn't move at first. Then it buzzed. Once. Then again. Then continuously. The confidence slipped. Not all at once, but enough. What did you do? Luke held his gaze. The people you rely on, he said evenly. They don't like being exposed. Another notification. Another call. Aaron watched the shift happen in real time. The exact second Jason realized the damage wasn't contained anymore. That it had already spread past the point he could control. You forced them into the open, Aaron added quietly. Now they have to choose. Jason's grip tightened around his phone. His expression didn't collapse, but it hardened, tension replacing certainty. You're not untouchable, Luke said. Silence stretched. For the first time, Jason didn't have an immediate response. No smooth deflection. No calculated comeback. Just the weight of something unraveling. This isn't finished, he said finally, but the words lacked force. Aaron met his gaze, steady. No, he agreed softly. But you are. That landed harder than anything else. Jason didn't answer. He turned instead, too controlled, too quick, and walked out without another word. The door closed behind him, and the space he left behind felt lighter. Aaron exhaled slowly, only then realizing how still he had been standing. Luke didn't move right away either. Then his hand found Aaron's, fingers threading through his, firm and grounding. You did well, Luke said quietly. Aaron shook his head faintly. We did. A small pause. Then Aaron leaned in, resting lightly against him. Not from uncertainty, but from something steadier. Luke's arm came around him naturally. No hesitation. No distance. It's done, Luke said. Aaron closed his eyes for a second, letting that settle. Then let's go home. The days that followed didn't slow down immediately, but they softened. The sharp edge of everything that had just happened faded into something more manageable, more contained. Luke was still busy. More than before, if anything. There were loose ends to close, contracts to stabilize, people to reassure. He left early, came back late, sometimes with the weight of a dozen conversations still sitting quietly on his shoulders. But he didn't carry it the same way anymore. Not alone. Aaron didn't try to stop him. He adjusted instead. The house settled into a new rhythm, one that bent around Luke's schedule without breaking. Breakfasts were shorter, but never skipped. Dinners sometimes ran late, but Luke always came back to them. And when he did, Aaron was there. Sometimes with food already on the table. Sometimes just waiting, laptop still open, a half-finished paragraph blinking quietly on the screen. Aaron's manuscript was almost done. It had grown without him forcing it, page by page, shaped by everything he had lived through in ways he hadn't fully planned. The stillness of the countryside, the quiet strength Luke carried, the way healing didn't come all at once, but settled in slowly, until one day it simply felt like part of you. Luke read parts of it sometimes. Not all, just enough. He didn't comment much, but when he did, it was precise, thoughtful. And every time, Aaron found himself rewriting just a little, not because it was wrong, but because Luke had seen something deeper than he had put into words. "You're finishing it," Luke said one evening, standing behind him, fingers brushing lightly over his shoulder. Aaron nodded, eyes still on the screen. "Almost." Luke leaned down slightly, pressing a brief kiss against his temple. "It's good." Aaron smiled faintly. "You haven't read the ending yet." "I don't need to," Luke replied. Aaron turned his head slightly. "That confident?" Luke met his gaze. "And you?" "Yeah." Aaron didn't answer. He didn't need to. Somewhere between the work, the quiet, and the way their lives had begun to settle into each other, things felt steady. Not perfect, not untouched by what had come before, but whole. It happened on an ordinary day. Nothing special. No sign that anything was about to change. Luke came home later than usual, loosening his collar. Slightly as he stepped inside, Aaron was already setting the table, the smell of something warm and familiar filling the space. Atlas lifted his head lazily from his usual spot, tail thumping once against the floor in greeting. Milo occupied his favorite chair like it had always belonged to him, while Luna watched from the windowsill, half asleep in the fading light. "You're late," Aaron said, not looking up immediately. "Ran longer than expected," Luke replied, setting his things aside. He stepped closer without thinking, hand brushing lightly against Aaron's back as he passed. Aaron leaned into it for just a second before moving again. They sat down together, the quiet between them easy, comfortable. Aaron picked up his chopsticks, taking a small bite without thinking, then paused. It was subtle at first, a slight shift, a feeling that didn't quite belong. He frowned faintly, setting the chopsticks down. Luke noticed immediately. "What is it?" Aaron didn't answer right away. He pressed his fingers lightly against his stomach, trying to place it. Then the wave came. Sudden, sharp enough to catch him off guard. Aaron pushed his chair back quickly, standing up too fast as he turned away. Luke was already moving before the sound even settled. "Aaron!" Aaron didn't make it far. He reached the sink just in time, bracing himself against the counter as the nausea hit harder this time. Luke stopped just behind him, not touching at first, giving him space, but close enough to steady him if he needed it. His hand hovered for a second, then settled gently against Aaron's back. "Hey," Luke said quietly. "It's okay." Aaron shook his head slightly, breathing uneven for a moment before it passed just enough for him to straighten. "I'm fine," he said, though his voice came softer than usual. Luke didn't move his hand. "You don't look fine." Aaron let out a small breath, wiping his mouth lightly before turning back. "Probably just something I ate." Luke didn't respond immediately. His gaze stayed on Aaron longer than necessary, measuring, noticing. "You've been like this before?" Aaron hesitated. "A few times," he admitted. "Not this bad." That was enough. The atmosphere shifted, subtle, but undeniable. Luke didn't panic. He never did. But the way he moved changed, more focused, more deliberate. "We're checking," he said. Aaron blinked. "Luke, I'm not guessing." Luke cut in, calm but firm. "We'll check." Aaron held his gaze for a second, then nodded. The drive was quiet. Not tense. Just aware. Aaron didn't think much during it. Or maybe he did, but the thoughts didn't settle into anything clear yet. At the clinic, everything moved quickly. Routine. Efficient. Luke stayed with him the entire time. Not hovering. Not overwhelming. Just there. When the result came back, it didn't come with drama. No build-up. No pause. Just a simple confirmation. Positive. Aaron stared at it for a second longer than necessary. Then blinked. "Oh." That was all he said. Luke didn't speak right away. He looked at the result, then at Aaron. And something shifted again. Not tension. Not uncertainty. Something deeper. His hand reached out slowly, fingers wrapping around Aaron's. Firm, grounding, real. "We're having a baby," he said quietly. Aaron let out a small breath that almost sounded like a laugh, but softer. Warmer. Yeah. The word felt different when he said it. Real in a way nothing else had been before. Aaron's fingers tightened slightly in Luke's grip. Not from fear. Not from hesitation. Just from something new beginning to settle into place. They didn't rush the wedding. Not because there was doubt. There wasn't any left. But because neither of them needed something grand to prove what had already settled quietly between them. By the time everything was ready, it felt less like planning an event and more like opening their life to the people who had already become part of it. The ceremony took place right outside their home. The garden had changed over the months. Greener, fuller, small details added without Aaron even realizing when they had appeared. Rows of flowers lining the path, soft lights woven through the wooden fence, a long table set under the open sky. It wasn't extravagant, but it was full. Atlas refused to stay out of it from the very beginning. He followed Luke everywhere, occasionally stepping directly into the path as if making sure nothing important happened without his approval. Milo had claimed the best seat in the house, right on one of the chairs near the front, tail flicking lazily like he owned the ceremony. Luna stayed closer to Aaron, weaving between his steps until he bent slightly to pick her up for a moment, earning a soft murmur of laughter from those nearby. Luke's family arrived early. Of course they did. The space filled with familiar noise almost immediately, voices overlapping, chairs moving, someone arguing about where things should go before immediately being ignored. His mother hovered between everything, commenting on details no one else would notice, while secretly making sure everything was perfect. His father stood a little further back, observing, stepping in only when something actually needed fixing. Noah was everywhere. "You're really doing this," Noah said, appearing beside Aaron out of nowhere, arms crossed like he was evaluating a very serious decision. Aaron glanced at him. "I thought that was already decided." Noah tilted his head. "I just want to confirm you've had enough time to reconsider." "Too late," Aaron replied calmly. "I signed papers." Noah sighed dramatically. "Tragic," then leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "If he starts acting difficult, you tell me. I have leverage." "I'm standing right here," Luke said from behind him. Noah didn't even flinch. Transparency is important in a marriage. Aaron laughed under his breath before he could stop himself. Not far from them, another figure hovered, hesitating just enough to be noticeable. Ethan. He looked different this time. Still the same bright energy, but quieter around the edges. Less certain, more aware. When Aaron's gaze met his, Ethan shifted slightly, then walked over. "Hi," he said, a little awkward this time. Aaron nodded. "Hi." A brief pause. Then Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. "You look good." Aaron smiled faintly. "You too." Another pause. Then, quickly, like he didn't want to overthink it. "I'm not going to cause trouble today," Ethan added. "I was specifically told not to." "By who?" Aaron asked. Ethan pointed vaguely over his shoulder. "Everyone." Aaron let out a quiet laugh. Ethan hesitated for a second longer, then added, softer, "I'm happy for you." "Really?" This time, Aaron didn't hesitate. "Thank you." Ethan nodded once, then stepped back, not pushed away, not dismissed. Just finding his place in a different way. When the ceremony finally began, it wasn't loud. No grand music. No long speeches. Just the quiet presence of people who mattered, gathered close enough to witness something simple and real. Luke stood across from Aaron, exactly the same as always, and somehow different in a way that only Aaron seemed to notice. There were words spoken, promises made. Not dramatic, not overwhelming, just steady, certain. When it was over, nothing exploded into applause immediately. It came naturally, soft at first, then warmer, fuller, filling the space around them. Luke's hand found Aaron's again, just like it always did, firm, grounding. And this time, there was nothing left unspoken between them. The celebration that followed felt less like an event and more like a continuation. Food passed around. Laughter carried easily through the evening. Noah somehow managing to involve himself in everything while claiming he was supervising. Atlas stayed close, occasionally pushing his way between guests until someone inevitably gave him attention. Milo never moved from his seat. Luna disappeared and reappeared at random like she had her own schedule entirely. Aaron didn't notice when the night fully settled. He only noticed that Luke was still beside him, steady as ever, and that for once, he wasn't waiting for anything to change. 6 months later, everything did. but not in the way it once had. The hospital room was quiet, softer than Aaron expected. The world outside felt far away, like it had stepped back just enough to let this moment exist on its own. Luke hadn't left his side. Not once. When the cry finally came, small, sharp, unmistakably alive, Aaron didn't react right away. Not because he didn't feel it, but because it took a second for something that big to settle into something real. Then Luke's hand tightened around his. "He's here," Luke said quietly. Aaron turned his head, eyes landing on the small bundle for the first time. Everything else fell away. "Yeah," he whispered. It wasn't overwhelming. It wasn't chaotic. It was quiet. Certain. The same kind of certainty that had been building between them from the very beginning. Only now, it had taken shape into something they could hold. Luke leaned closer, his forehead resting briefly against Aaron's. "We did good," he said softly. Aaron let out a breath that almost trembled, but didn't. "We did." And this time, there was no doubt left anywhere in it.